This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira. We have a special two-part episode. Dr. Lindsay Cash. You're going to love her story, and you can feel her passion for dentistry and the amount of adversity that she's faced and that grit, that good old-fashioned grit that you're just not going to knock her down. She thinks in the mindset of abundancy. Well, she has gone fully fee for service as of January 2024, and she chose to drop the elephant in the room first as opposed to the low-hanging fruit. So really interesting story. Of course, her startup was January 2020, and we all know what happened in March 2020, but that did not deter her. In fact, to use that pause in the world to just absolutely continue to build her base. And I just really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you will too. Very inspiring. A startup. Yes, a startup in 2020. Doing very well and just kicking it and taking names. As always, the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast is brought to you by Kettenbach. Kettenbach Dental is excited to announce the first major advancement in fluoride varnish treatment, Profacel. It's no longer with alcohol or resin. It's in a dimethicone mucoadhesive gel. It leaves a smooth and silky feeling. No more grit. Contact Kettenbach today for more details and do more varnishes that patients will appreciate. 877-532-2123 or visit kettenbachusa.com. If you like the show, please click like, share it with your friends, subscribe, download, all that good stuff. It's on YouTube. It's on anywhere you get your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. If you don't like something, please let me know. I would appreciate that. And if you want to be a guest, I'd appreciate that too. We'd love to hear your story and love to hear what you got going on. SonnySpira@gmail.com or 607-624-2962. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira today. Our guest is Dr. Lindsay Cash. Let me give you a little bit of her background. She graduated from the College of Charleston in 2009. It's a beautiful campus. And went on to complete dental school at the Medical University of South Carolina. So we can't get this gal out of South Carolina, but we're gonna try to get her out of there. She furthered her education with a one-year GPR at Palmetto Health Richland Hospital system in, guess where? Columbia, South Carolina. After leaving the residency, she jumped into the wild, wild west of dental associateships, seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of poorly run private practice and small town DSOs. She decided to venture into a scratch startup practice in January 2020, right before the pandemic. Oh my goodness. 6 weeks prior to COVID, less than 4 years after opening, she has transitioned her startup practice into a fully out-of-network fee-for-service practice. I just love to hear that. She has achieved her fellowship with the Academy of General Dentistry, is a member of the American Academy of Clear Aligners, the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, and is heavily involved in advanced CE with Spear and Clinical Mastery Series. Awesome. Lindsay, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. That's a great background. So
yeah, it's been something.
So where did you grow up? Let's start in the beginning.
South Carolina, born and raised. So
Okay.
this is home for me.
How far from where you grew up are you practicing now?
Literally 20 minutes. I have patients in my practice that I went to high school with.
There you go. Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm back pretty much. I live probably a mile and a half from where I grew up.
Yep.
So nothing wrong with it. So you what did your folks do growing up? What was the environment like?
Yeah, there's nobody in healthcare in my family. There's no other dentist. There's nothing like that. My dad is an electrical engineer and my mom is admin for the art department at Commerce College. So
Okay.
um my mom was an influence in kind of my decision to go into dentistry because it was the perfect mix of art and science, and that's kind of what drew me to dentistry. And I had been around art my whole life. So that's
That's
kind
so
of,
true, by the way. I mean,
yeah,
I think you're the first person that really nailed it. Dr. Jeffrey Hoos, we talked to him, and one of his topics was the beauty, art, and science of dentistry.
yeah,
And and talk about a perfect marriage too. Your dad's in engineering, your mom is, in the art department. It's that's a nice cocktail. That's great.
yeah. And that's what drew me to dentistry is, it literally was the perfect mix of art and science. And to be able to take something that is completely man-made and make it look like something that somebody was born with is a challenge. And it's a challenge we get to do every day.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, in high school, were you leaning that way? At what point did you kind of get that put in your put in
I
your
I
front view
wanted
mirror, let's say?
I wanted to be a dentist since middle school.
Oh,
Literally,
cool. So did I. Good for you.
yeah. So that's kind of always been my career path. I don't know. I loved it. I was the weird kid that loved to get out of school to go to my dental appointments. I was that kid.
The weird, that doesn't make you weird.
Yeah.
You had an inkling and then you just followed your heart. I mean, we have a lot in common. I'm already getting so far. So
Yeah.
that's cool. I mean, I didn't have the dentist part. Like my dentist he could care less what I wanted to do. He was like, he gave me a one sentence answer each time I saw him. And I was like, this guy, really?
Yep.
So, so was your dentist encouraging? Let's start with that.
Yeah, my dentist was encouraging. As I got older and as I thought I wanted to be a dentist, they definitely allowed me to do some shadowing hours, but you think you're so cool when you're shadowing and you're like, oh, I'm hanging out at the dental office, like maybe I'll be a dentist one day. And then you realize that you're literally just standing there watching somebody, but you literally still know nothing about dentistry or the business aspect or like all the stuff that goes into dentistry that's not dentistry. Um, but yeah, my dentists growing up were super helpful and more than willing to let me hang out and pester them at their practice and just kind of observe and learn and grow.
They still in practice?
Yeah, they sure are.
And was it a solo, like the old school one doc solo office, one
Yes.
hygienist? Like, yeah,
Yep.
that's how I went too. Yeah, the hygienist was my classmate. It was her mother. Kelly Carell's mom was the hygienist, and
I love
I would
it.
see her. Yeah, and it was funny. That's just what we were used to. And he practiced standing up too. The dentist I used to see,
Yep.
and his
It's small town. I'm small town South Carolina, born and raised. And so
we have a lot in
yeah,
common.
everybody goes to the high school football games on Friday nights. And it's just it's small town USA. That's where I love. That's where home is for me.
That's in our mission statement. Small town USA. I mean, I love it. That's our wheelhouse too. So, do you have a relationship to this day? Like, does he or she, did they recognize the fact that they had such a major influence on your career?
Not so much. We practice on kind of opposite sides of the city. They're like 30 minutes away from where I practice.
Mhm.
And our practice, the practice that I have that I started is very different than the practice that I grew up in. And
I got
so
you.
they are very heavily, PPO driven, PPO dependent, and it's kind of a like a hygiene mill, so to speak, which isn't necessarily the model that I wanted for my practice. But I love him, and we're very cordial to each other when we run into each other at events or things like that.
Going out of network can be really scary, but staying in network can be even scarier and riskier too long term. Insurance reimbursements aren't even keeping pace with inflation, which can really affect the quality of your work, not to mention the quality of your life. I'm Allison Bernstein.
I'm Dr. Josh Bernstein. We went out of network over 20 years ago, and we can show you what worked, what didn't, and how you can do it with minimal risk.
ThriveOutOfNetwork.com teaches you everything you need to know, including the most important part, which is getting your team on board. It teaches them how to communicate with patients and getting them comfortable with the entire process.
Go to ThriveOutOfNetwork.com and check it out today. That's ThriveOutOfNetwork.com.
Now, do you reach out to young aspiring dentists and kind of help them?
I do. I'm super passionate about that.
Yeah, me too.
I have guest lectured several times for the GPR that I graduated from, especially helping younger dentists that are getting ready to start reading contracts and negotiate job opportunities on the open marketplace, because nobody teaches you that, right? And you don't know what to look for, and you don't know what's fair, and you don't know who's trying to take advantage of you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that prey on younger dentists that, I mean, they know that they don't know what they're looking for, and they know they don't know what fair market value is and those types of things. So I do that. And I also work as a faculty member with Ideal Practices, helping other scratch start dental entrepreneurs that have decided to go out on their own.
Okay. We have too much in common, literally, because I speak at the University of Buffalo, my dental school, and that's pretty much the main topic, although I let them ask me any questions they want.
Yeah.
But it's giving them someone from outside the four walls opinion. And it might disagree with everything they've heard up to that point, but that's okay, you know. And a lot of them, yeah, it is the first time they've heard it or thought about it. So I get usually the D3 students, and that's where we start. So which I still call them juniors, and I get yelled at. It's D3.
Right.
Okay. So, sorry.
Yeah.
I was a junior in my third year, but you're D3. I got you.
Yes. Yes.
So I got a bunch of questions that follow along that vein, but
Go ahead.
let's get into it. So you're in College of Charleston, which is, by the way, one of the prettiest campuses in the
Isn't it
country.
stunning? It's the best.
Unreal. And then you go to dental school. Did you have any thoughts of specializing at that point or during your 4 years?
So, I feel like we all get to that point, maybe the end of sophomore, D2, the end of D2. When you're finally getting to glove up and start treating patients, and you don't know, right? And so the only thing that you know at that point is how to hopefully call for help if you need it, and maybe cut an occlusal composite, but you don't know really what the specialties entail. You can Google like what the salaries are, and I think that's what a lot of people do, and they're like, oh, this looks good, maybe I'll do this. For me, it was more relationship driven, and I knew that I really wanted to form a relationship with my patients and be able to see them grow and watch their families grow and see how things develop and changed over time, as opposed to in many specialties when it's like a one and done interaction. Like you're seeing the patient, you're doing the surgery, and then they're gone and they're back to their general dentist. So for me, that was really the driving factor. Was I wanted a very much relationship-based practice.
Okay. So you graduate dental school, and like you said, you got into the Wild Wild West. You graduated, was it 2013?
It was 2013. Yep.
And a residency. So 2014 is when you go practice, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So talk just briefly that year in residency. What did that do for you, and what were your goals to come out of that?
So that year in residency was one of the most valuable years of my entire life. And I can confidently say that when and if I get to a point where I'm ready to hire an associate, I don't think that I would consider somebody that was fresh out of school that hadn't done something like a GPR or something to advance their education, because even though it's still kind of dental school dentistry, it's so much more than that. And it gives you a chance to experience so many facets of dentistry that I wasn't personally exposed to, or that I was exposed to extremely minimally in dental school. So I can't speak highly enough about how valuable that year was. And I was doing a whole bunch of stuff that I don't even do now. And it's still so valuable to get that experience and to meet other people in dentistry that I will be lifelong friends with some of my co-residents. So I can't speak highly enough about that year and what that meant to me.
What did you lean into in your residency?
You know, I don't know that is. I've never thought about that until you said that. I think that, you're kind of drinking from a fire hose and you're doing all of
Right.
these big pieces and it's just like, what am I doing? But really what I leaned into was really high level continuing education. And I really tapped into a lot of the student discounts that I was able to get through some of the bigger names of continuing education. So I got super involved with Spear towards the end of residency, which truly changed my life, just to be able to know, oh, this is how high quality dentistry can be done. Even though I wasn't at a point where I was able to execute that, or where I owned my own practice and had full control to implement those things. It was just being able to see the side of dentistry that wasn't residency, that wasn't dental school, that's like, here's real world dentistry and here's what can be done and what the possibilities are, as opposed to here's the free Crest CE that you need to check a box for your license,
Factor bicuspid too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some of the free CE sites. It's kind of funny, but it's evident, like in just the very simple bio that we went through, is that CE is near and dear to your heart, and the clear aligners and some of the other things that you're doing. It's got to be very synergistic with what you started. So, in essence, the additional education really allowed you to learn and lean into more education and making education just a part of your DNA. So
Yeah.
that's commendable. So now talk about, you're in your residency and you're going to get out and you're going to start working. How
Mhm.
does that look? What did you do?
Okay, so quick rundown of my experience as an associate. The first practice that I went into was a total bait and switch. I was promised that I was going to be signing on to work in a brand new remodeled building in a small town. And the remodel, 2 days before I was supposed to start my very first job, they called me and they were like, hey, the remodel's not done. You're going to be in the, our older location. Well, I show up, it's 20 minutes further into the mountains than where I think I'm going to be practicing, next to a cinder block auto mechanic shop called Dumpy's. It has purple painted walls and shag carpet, and the entire front awning on the building has been ripped off because the UPS truck took a corner too sharp. So I'm like, for real?
Do you have any lava lamps or disco balls? I mean, do you have little ambience inside?
You know what? It would have made it look better, honestly. So that
So
was
wait, so let me ask you, let's just give me a little brief leading up to that. How
Yeah.
did you, like, if I'm because I get this question a lot, how do I find things? Where do you go about finding that job that you're now ready to go start? How did that happen?
So
What was
I
it?
found that job through a connection in residency. So one of my attendings had a friend that was looking for an associate, which sounded like a super solid lead. Like, I trust this
Sure.
person. It's
That's
great.
personal. That's not Indeed. That's not,
No, it was
the
completely
back of a journal. That's personal.
but he had no
Usually
idea.
lands good. Yeah.
Yeah, usually a
Wow.
great lead.
Did you go back and say, look at this? I mean, were they?
Yeah. Yeah, and they were shocked. I didn't end up staying there long, and it wasn't even the bait and switch of the location. What really got me is once we were into the newer location, they were too cheap to buy enough hand pieces, and so they forbade us from sterilizing hand pieces between use, and just like caviciding and just wiping it down. I was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not doing this. This is
Good
disgusting.
for you. Good for
Um
you. Because ultimately, yeah, that falls on you.
Right. Right.
Now, was it like a privately owned?
Yeah, it was privately owned.
Okay, so it
Privately.
was someone who owned multiple practices, then I'm assuming.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Okay,
Um,
so were they successful with what they were doing up to that point? I mean,
no, I think that they were going through and just trying to collect practices to
flip.
kind of bundle something together to be able to turn around and
Yeah,
package up for a DSO.
yeah.
Um,
Flip it and then try to,
flip it,
you know,
and they had no interest in really being dentists. They just wanted to collect practices
yeah,
and have the practices make money for them. They
good for you. So
carried
okay,
zero.
so that's practice one, and you were there what, 3 months?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good
I
for
left
you. How do you go about finding the second place?
So the second position that I took, I found through through like my Patterson rep that had called
Okay,
on that practice, and we had kind of become friends. And he was like, "Hey, I have this other doctor. He's looking for an associate. He built a brand new practice. He was located down on the coast of South Carolina, and he built a practice in the upstate. And then his wife decided that she didn't want to move, and so he had a brand new practice and nobody to work it for him because his family didn't want to relocate." And so I ended up in a scratch start office that he didn't care about, essentially, because he wasn't going to be working it. So it was not outfitted. I ended up having to do an entire scratch start opening office order by myself. Um, a year out of residency,
did,
not
did
knowing what I didn't know.
did they give you some parameters? Like, here's our budget?
Yes.
Anything?
Here's our budget. Go through and make a list of every single thing that you'll need to do every facet of dentistry. And so it was one of those things where I did the best I could, but then I would have somebody on the schedule and I'd be like, oh, wait, I don't, I'm asking for something mid-procedure. And they're like, oh, we don't have that. So that's fun.
I'll get you to be creative, a little MacGyver action, right?
It does. Yeah. And excuse me,
So basically, you're thrown on an island in this situation. Fair?
100%.
And you're there how long?
I stayed there 6 to 8 months. The owner had lots of personal issues going on and was mistreating a lot of the employees, and it was not a good situation for me to stay in.
So
So
what did you grow? Just curiosity. So you're starting at zero. That practice is at a zero. In 6 to 8 months, what's the practice look like?
we were growing. We were growing a lot. We weren't sitting around on our butts. We were doing ground level marketing. We were hustling, we were growing, we were doing all the things, but I still had no capacity to make decisions. So I was still just a pair of hands. I was still just
So,
there to like execute.
so you're doing all these things. Are you getting paid a little higher compensation than an average just
No,
step in and work?
in fact, he had me misclassified as a 1099, and I didn't know that he shouldn't have been doing that. But every chance that he could have to take advantage of me was taken.
Okay. So lesson number 2. Okay.
Learned it. Yeah.
So now walk us through step 3. What happens next? This, by the way, is very enlightening. So this is,
So
I
step
can
3.
literally see some of these things as you're talking about them. So go ahead.
Yeah. So step 3 was, so I live, my husband and I live in just outside of Greenville in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Columbia for us is like an hour and a half away in the middle of the state. And I had gotten a recruiter had reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for an associate doctor in Columbia, blah, blah, blah. I drove down and met with them. I made it very abundantly clear, like, this is the level of dentistry I want to practice. I don't believe in corporate dentistry. I don't want to be a part of a DSO. I've been a part of people that were collecting practices. I'm not interested in this, and was promised the world. It was a no. This is a small, we're a group practice. We have 2 locations only. You're going to be at one. I'll be at the other. We can still treatment plan together if you need anything. And within 6 months of me signing that contract, he had purchased 8 more offices. So it was again, I was wrapped up into a DSO and a small town DSO. And now
So it's not officially a DSO. It's someone starting their own DSO,
Yeah.
essentially is what you're saying, right?
They're just collecting practices.
Another entrepreneur, same thing as the first guy.
Correct. And now I'm driving 3 hours round trip to be a part of it.
Mhm.
So an hour and a half to work in the morning, working all day, hour and a half home.
But
But
you've
I
seen
did,
this movie before, so you had to
yeah. So I did that for 2 years, and
2
then
years.
we
Wow.
relocated to Columbia. Um, but I needed to do that because I had to get out of my non-competes because I knew I wanted to come back to the upstate. And so we just sucked it up and did it. Um, because even if a non-compete is not technically enforceable, I didn't have the money to fight it. Like how much do you really want to push that?
Mhm.
Um, and I know a lot of that has kind of gotten shaken up and potentially thrown out now, but
Yeah. Yeah, it was a different world at this point, no
what
question.
it was. And
Mhm.
even if I could have won that battle, like I don't have the stomach lining or the finances to do that, to go to bat with that,
Mhm.
especially not at, he had investors backing him. He had way more finance and capital to play with than I did. So when I when I had my son, I quit my job at the same time that I had my son. I was a pair of hands. We had saved up enough money for me to stay out of work for 6 weeks to be on maternity leave. But if I wasn't producing, I wasn't getting paid. And my son was born at 31 weeks via an emergency C-section and was in the
Oh,
NICU for 3 months. Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's not a normal scenario of 6 weeks return. No.
no. So you're right, it's not, but I was back seeing patients in 10 days after an emergency C-section, working with staples in my abdomen because if I had used the finances to stay home and heal while my son was in the NICU, I wouldn't have had any time to bond with him when he was released from the NICU. So I was back at work, working through lunch, stopping at like 4 o'clock, going home and showering patient germs off, and then going to the NICU until 11 or 12 at night when they closed. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm
You're still in
tired.
Columbia now?
Still in Columbia. Yeah.
And what
No,
year what year was your son born?
he was born in 2018. Yeah,
Okay.
January 2018.
So this is where your epiphany is going to come in, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Um, and I was so miserable, but the thought of looking for another job and jumping into another associateship made me physically nauseous. And I was like, I'm done. Like if I'm doing this, I'm doing this for myself. And what I realized, the outside influence at that time was so heavily, don't do a startup, don't do a startup, buy a practice. There's immediate cash flow. Like you're insane to do a startup, don't do a startup. And I get that. But I also think that people that have been in dentistry for quite a while need to understand that the available properties to younger dentists that are looking to purchase are far different than they were 15 or 20 years ago. Now, the really great cash cow practices that would have been an awesome opportunity to purchase are scooped up by DSOs and corporate dentistry, and they're paying 150% of what the practice value is worth. I can't even get a loan for that, nor does it make sense to get a loan for that. But it was just all the practices that I saw in the market were kind of crap opportunities. And I would be inheriting staff that inherited me, that weren't choosing there to be there because they believed in me or that they believed in my practice vision. It was kind of their doctor retired and they were stuck with me now, which I had gotten to see end really poorly in my last associateship. So I was like, all right, we're going to do a scratch start. And so I had a NICU infant, and quit my job in a blaze of glory before I realized that was a really bad idea, because now I have to string together maternity leaves to be able to pull financing for opening a practice and selling a home and buying a home all in a week turnaround time. So it was just kind of chaotic, and we rolled with it and finally got the doors open, and then COVID happened. So it's just kind of been one of those things where it's been one after the other.
Okay, so when did this start? When did you quit?
Well, it would have been right after my son was born. So January, probably February of 2018.
February 2018.
Mhm.
And you didn't open up till almost 2 years later, till about January
Yeah. So
2020, right?
I did maternity leaves and locum tenens stuff for probably a year, filling in maternity leaves and things like that. And then I also took an associateship that was like an hour away from me, to where I was not, I wasn't going to be in a non-compete or do anything to,
Sure.
to their business and took an associateship and worked for them at night while I built my practice.
All right. So talk about the steps. I think the timeline makes sense now, but so you're scratching, you're hustling, you're hustling to continue to have some money coming in as you're building your new nest, right? So talk about the steps that you took to do this. Did you look for land first? Did you look for a lease, location? What about geography? Did you know what town you wanted to settle in? Talk about all those steps, because those are the big ones.
Those are the big ones. And for me personally, I'm not somebody that wants it's not in my heart to own like 5, 6, 7 practices. That's not my goal. No shame if that's your goal or what you want to do with your practice. It's just not my vision. I want to own one practice and I want to blow it out of the water and have it be successful. And so I knew, since I wasn't planning on doing this a bunch of times, I didn't really have the bandwidth nor the leeway space to kind of make mistakes and then course correct for subsequent practices. So I hired Ideal Practices to help me through that startup process and kind of help me figure out, okay, demographically, this area can support a dentist. This is the area we should be looking in. And when we decided, because originally we weren't sure if we wanted to stay in Columbia and do a scratch start in Columbia or move closer to home where my family is and where we had family to help us in case our son was sick or whatever. It just became really evident to us as we started looking at different locations and scouting locations that we wanted to be near to family. And that's why we decided to move back to the upstate. But as far as like lease negotiations and scouting out locations and stuff like that, I worked with a healthcare realtor. Car Realty was phenomenal during that entire process. And then I had Ideal Practices kind of helping guide me in the steps and the timeline that we needed to follow.
Now, were you looking to buy a building or buy the real estate, or were you looking to rent?
I would have loved to have bought everything, but financially it was not feasible.
Okay.
The banks doing a scratch start would not loan the amount of money that it would have taken for me to buy land, build a building, all of that for a start. Ultimately, that's my goal, but definitely starting out with rent.
So you needed to find a space.
Yeah.
And so Ideal Practices. So I'm guessing, do they scout locations within the radius that you say, listen, I want to practice within a 7-mile radius of downtown Okie-Skokie, and here, there's 7 or 8 towns that are within that purview. Let's do that. Is that talk about how that works?
So the very first decision that I made was, how long do I want my commute to be every day? Because
okay. So from your house, take a radius, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And so if we are,
that's cool.
That's the biggest determining factor for me, is like, I don't want to sit in the car for an hour again. I don't care if there's a great opportunity, but it means that I'm going to be in the car for 3 hours. Like, that's no, I
talking about quality of life is what you're talking about.
Quality of life, 100%. And so we started, the very first basic decision we had to make is, how far do you want to commute every day? And then from there, it's okay. What area of town do you want to live in? And then let's draw a radius out from the area that you want to live.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how it goes. Okay.
And then we started looking at areas, what demographics can support within that area.
Did they send you to say, hey, go drive through some of these places? Take us through the next step. So you've given them some parameters. You want to open up a scratch dental office, X amount of distance from this pin in the map. Then did they say, hey, we like town Joby's, go check it out? Did they do that? Or did
Yes. So they ran demographics and said, hey, this area is a really great area for a dental practice. Go, we were driving around every weekend just looking to see if we saw anything that they didn't see, but Car Realty were the ones that really had the boots on the ground, that were, looking at all the MLS stuff behind the scenes. And they actually found this location that I'm currently in before I'd ever even hit anything that I could see on my end. They had access to realty stuff on their back end that they could see that I couldn't. So they were.
So Car is independent of Ideal Practices?
Yeah, they're independent, completely independent.
And you hired them, or Ideal Practices? Who set up that that relationship?
Ideal Practices had worked with them previously, and they kind of introduced me to them, but
Okay. So they facilitate it. Yeah.
they totally facilitated it, but it doesn't cost anything to work with them. The landlord covers their fees
I'm
on
with
that.
you. I'm with you. Okay, so what did it come down to? How many choices did you have, or did you just really just nail this one right away?
This one was exactly what I was looking for. We just had to make the lease negotiations work. And so this was the front runner. We just had to make sure that financially everything fit where it was supposed to fit.
Okay. So what does that look like? Did you have to negotiate on per square footage? Did you negotiate on leasehold improvements? Did you negotiate on tax? I mean, talk us a little bit through that process that you went through.
All of the above. And Ideal Practices was huge within that because they had kind of stipulations that they really encouraged building into the lease. And so we negotiated all of those things. And I actually needed more space than what was available. So we negotiated taking half of my neighbor's space also.
Good for you.
So we had to kind of work it. It worked out perfect because my neighbor is with Edward Jones, and he needed a really small office and I needed more space. And so we cut his unit in half. And it worked out for both of us. But just things that, there were a lot of things during that process that I didn't realize until I was going through the process, until you've had to negotiate that and until you've had to scout a location and figure out a lease. You kind of don't know what you don't know. And I didn't realize that, for instance, if I'm driving around and I pass a retail area that says lease space available and I call it, I'm potentially going to get way different terms as a commoner than if Car Realty or somebody from Ideal Practices is calling. It's very different. And I don't think people always realize that.
So what were some of the things that you noticed? I mean, was it just the starting points? What were some things that you learned? Just you want to go a little deeper into that?
Oh man. I think that, especially with startups, one of the biggest things for me that I always tell people is having a neutral party to help guide you through that process is so valuable, because I think that historically the way startups have worked is, as an associate is unhappy where they are, a sales rep that you've kind of formed a bond with as an associate over time gets wind that you want to do a startup. They become your best buddy. They want to wine and dine you and say, hey, we'll do your floor plan, as long as you spend X number of dollars with us, it's free, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of these startup doctors that I see are kind of roped into using whatever vendor they just have formed a relationship with along the way, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to get quotes from Patterson, Shine, Benco, Darby, like whoever, and I'm going to bid them against each other, and I'm going to figure out what's best for me from a business decision instead of just making gut decisions based off of a relationship.
Sure.
But I think that there's a certain sense of comfort, and that's why a lot of associate doctors get roped into that, is because you form a relationship with somebody at a company that you trust, and you just kind of go along with the process.
Okay, so do you want to share with us first of all, how many square feet did you end up going for when you added the 50% Edward Jones?
I'm right at 2,500 square feet in my practice.
That's good. That's a good size. 2,400 works. Do you guys share any space, by the way, with the Edward Jones? You share a receptionist area? You share a bathroom? Anything?
Nothing.
So it's completely wall dead on that side. Okay. Yep. So I'm guessing your place was about 1,750 and you picked up 750 next door. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So you're in. You've got what you're looking for. Now, what's your budget?
Budget regarding what? For the build out? So I had a $500,000 budget for build out, and working capital, all that stuff. Like I had $500,000 to play with, essentially.
And equipment too? Everything? The whole kit and caboodle?
Whole kit and caboodle.
2,500 square feet.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
That's a tight budget. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, was there any help on the leasehold improvements?
Yeah, we had TI. It's been so long. I want to say I had like $100,000 of TI allowance that went into it.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Okay. How about what's your rent look like? What is it by the time you add in? You got a triple net lease, or what do you got?
Yeah, and my rent, I can't wait to own. My rent right now is like $6,900 a month, which for where I am is high. I realize that's not crazy high in other parts of the country, but for where I am it's pretty steep.
So $7,000 a month, but they put 100,000 into some of the improvements, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So they're getting some of that back.
Yep.
And did you sign a 5-year? How long?
10-year.
10-year. Okay. And you're in about year 4?
4. Yep.
Okay. And is it increased by CPI? I mean, is it raised or no?
Yeah, it does. It's gone up since we started. It's not a tremendous raise every year, but yeah, it creeps up.
Okay. All right. But you know what? You got what you wanted. Now, what were the must-haves for you? How many operatories, technology? What were some things that you had to have in your practice as you saw your practice like you wanted it, right? You knew you weren't going to compromise. You've seen those movies before. Now is your chance to get exactly what you want. What did you want it to be?
I wanted my practice to feel super modern and clean. On my vision board, the very first thing that I had at the very top was cannot smell like latex and mint. That old school like dental smell that
Can't
we
put
all
some Eugenol out there? You can't like have a Eugenol air freshener kind of thing?
awful. And I'm honestly, I'm at my practice more during the week than I'm at my home. And so it's got to feel comfortable. It's got to feel like somewhere that I'm inspired and that I want to spend my time and that my team wants to spend their time. Regarding technology, we kind of added it over time. We have a 3D printer, we have an iTero, we have a JDA, we have a T-scan, we have stuff like that now, but I didn't start with all of that stuff. I was budgeting heavily. And so we started with just 2 operatories and some hand pieces and small equipment. And we just rolled with it. I have plumbed 7 operatories. I have 5 outfitted. And I have 2 more that we can still outfit if and when we choose. But I really kind of like the pace we're going at right now. So I think
you started with 2 operatories in 2020.
Yeah.
Right as you started, 3 months in, the pandemic shut you down. And I mean, I couldn't even imagine that all that balled up into. You look at your history, you look at the shit that you dealt with to get to that point, the personal hurdles and challenges you're dealing with a NICU child, moving in locations, and now you've spent and you budgeted and you were so careful, and then 3 months later the government's shutting us all down. I probably would have lost a lot of stomach lining myself. But here's to you. Two operatories in 2020. What does it look like in 2021? Are you at 3 operatories at that point?
Yeah, for sure. We built
This
a
is so awesome. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
How fast did you go to 3 and 4?
I want to say I had a 3rd operatory purchased within 9 or 10 months after that. And then
after the COVID was over?
Yeah, coming out of COVID.
Okay.
And then we added 4 and 5 pretty quickly right after. I think we may have installed 4 and 5 at the same time, honestly.
So who did you hire? How many people were working for you in your 2 operatory office?
I had 1 person up front and I had 1 assistant, and I was doing all the hygiene and all the dentistry and all that stuff.
How did you create patient base? What did you do? And were you able to do that during that year and a half that you were plotting and planning it, and you know what I mean?
I was able to start doing that. So on the flip side, so COVID had a whole bunch of shit that it threw at me, right? Yeah. What it also did for me though is I hadn't refinanced my loans, so it gave me a cut off of having to pay my student loans immediately because everything went into forbearance. And it also made me get really scrappy with ground level marketing. And so I built my practice pretty much based off of ground level marketing through social media, because what I realized is that all of these small businesses that are around me that I want to network with that have like-minded clients and like-minded ideal patient bases, so to speak, they're all sitting at home on their phones on social media right now. And so if I reach out to these small businesses and I'm sending them messages, odds are that it's the owner or somebody pretty high up in the company that's going to be checking those messages. So I was able to network with a ton of businesses and kind of get support and help support a ton of other small businesses that were also in a super vulnerable position that were struggling due to COVID shutdowns, and really get my foot in the community and get a stronghold in the community before I ever open my doors.
See, that's where small towns thrive. They understand that. They absolutely do. There's nothing like we had a flood, and there's nothing like my neighbor coming over with a power washer, and we're cleaning off the crap in my driveway, and then I'm going over there and helping him, and we got our boots and our battle gear on, and the town is shut down to all traffic, only either businesses or residents are at. And you're going through this tragedy, but you have such this heartwarming feeling inside you.
Yep.
It's irreplaceable. And I think you nailed it. So it sounds like the pause. What I find interesting though, you're 3 months into it, and now you're doing more ground marketing. What did you do for the first 3 months? How did you build up somebody so that day one you have a body that's in the office? What did you do?
So my first day open, I had no openings. I was full the entire day. I had done so much ground level marketing before we ever even opened our doors to be able to get my name out and get patients in the door, that my first day literally was patients back to back, new patients back to back, which was phenomenal. And we definitely had slower days. I'm not going to sit here and be like, we were booked,
Yeah.
I didn't have any downtime at all. That's not true. But there was so much effort put into getting into the community and getting my name out, and, doing some special promotions, before we ever even opened, to get people in the door and get people to give us a chance, that were really instrumental in giving us patients to see right from the start.
So I have to ask you, because I just got this phrase from Chase Williams, who we just put his episode out the other day. BAM. Do you know what your BAM was when you started?
Yeah, it was all in.
It's funny, you guys know what it was. He had to explain it to me.
I'm trying to go back and think, before we had all those loans, I want to say just to meet loan payments and rent and all of that, it was probably 25 or 30 grand.
Well, that's not terrible.
It's not that bad.
So let's say 30 grand and you're working 4 days a week.
So then I was working either 2 or 3 days a week, and then another day as an associate. So
Okay,
a day or
so
two as an associate. So I was working 5 days a week, but only 2 or 3 in my practice.
all right, but realistically, so 3 days times 4 weeks, that's 12. It's about 12 days, right? A month.
Mhm.
Make it 15. You got to bring in at least 2 grand a day to get to that BAM.
Yeah.
How soon or when did you remember? Like a lot of people say, I remember the first time I hit that. Did you hit that in your first month? I'm guessing you did.
Yeah. Yeah, we broke even right out of the gate. So I wasn't necessarily
awesome.
right out of the gate, but I wasn't losing money, which
Because
was
it takes a bit. Some people they
yeah.
they learn a little bit, but you're a fire plug, because I mean, it's you've been knocked down so many times. It's your ability to bounce back that just makes you stronger and stronger. So I admire that. And so you got to be feeling good. You're not. So then but it's also got to kind of, what would you say, reaffirm that you're doing it the right way and you're doing the right things, because okay, you started out not in the red, and now you're getting along. And usually March tends to be a little busier time, I think, in a lot of offices with tax refunds, etc. And then all of a sudden things shut down again, and you use that pause to really build that business network. What does it look like going forward now for the rest of the year for you?
You're talking about right now, like at this moment?
No, 2020. Like, so
Okay.
you're in it now you probably
Yeah.
were shut down, I'm guessing, March 20th to, let's say, June 1st.
Yeah.
Right? So now you got 6 more months. But well, fortunately, hopefully the loans were put on pause for a second. Well, the same thing. And now you come back, and what does it look like going forward? Because you're already building, you're putting a third office. Do you add more days? Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so I left my associateship and went full time at my practice, which
That's
was
awesome.
week. Yeah, I did that in
When?
July.
July. Wow. 2
Um,
months out.
yeah. Which was a little sooner than I probably would have, but I told them, I was like, guys, I'm opening up a scratch start. I put them in touch with a new associate to fill my role, and she was graduating and starting. So I was like, oh, I
And
kind
you
of
were
gave,
all in though.
yeah,
See?
I was all in. But honestly, so much of how hard it was for me to get here is it's kind of like things don't faze me now because I've already been through so much shit. It's like, what do you have? Throw it my way. Like I'm fine. Like you can't give me anything that's worse than what I've
Bring
already
it
gone,
on.
right? So yeah, I found myself full-time in a practice and needed to be able to support employees more days. And so it's like, all right, let's go. Like, let's go.
Okay. Speaking of employees, you started with 2 employees. What's your employment look like July 1st when you go full time? How many people are working for you?
2 employees. I have 2
Okay.
employees.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it stayed the same.
Yeah.
And then you said by the end of the year, though, you're adding another app. How does your team grow in relationship to the practice too?
So the next person that I added was a hygienist because I was real overdoing hygiene. But I needed to wait until we had kind of made it through a 6-month cycle so that I had people that were coming back in so that I could kind of move them over that direction. Initially, I was in such a growth mindset that the trend and the tendency I feel like for so many doctors is let's make the hamster wheel run faster and let's add more people and more space and let's do night hours and weekend hours and evening hours, which I promised myself I would never do. And so your team gets bigger and bigger and you're increasing your overhead in a major way, but you're still in all of these PPO plans that are paying you pennies on the dollar. And as my team grew, that's kind of what the driving force for me to say, like, okay, we're big enough now, like we've grown this practice. I don't want to keep running on the hamster wheel, which is kind of one of the reasons why I made that big fundamental shift. But during those early years, it was let's grow, let's add more people, let's do those things. And I was in network with PPOs.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. So when you did your startup, you started in network.
Yeah, I did.
How many plans do you remember?
We were in with Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delta, GEHA, which is like all of them, right? It's the umbrella policy. So 2 or 3 of the big ones plus GEHA. No DMOs, no HMO plans, nothing like that. But I felt like I needed to be in network with several plans to be able to kind of grow a reputation and at least get some street cred behind my name. Because as a scratch start, I was starting from nothing. So I needed to be able to get some people in the door to get them to at least give me a chance. And it did. It helped me grow the practice a lot during those early years.
Oh, the end of the first year, did you sit down and look at your write-offs and how much you were giving away? I mean, what was the point that said, "Hey, I got to get out of get out"?
Yeah. So 3 months into my second year, I dropped Delta Dental because I had seen Delta be one of the harder ones to drop just because you typically have to collect everything upfront 100%. And I had seen so many of my senior doctors that I really looked up to growing up. I was looking at them now in a new light as a colleague and a professional, and they had grown this like 30-year practice that was just like an insurance beast, and they were too afraid to drop things. And I was like, I'm not doing this. And so I wanted to drop one of the biggest and hardest ones first so that
Wow.
everything else after that would kind of seem easy.
That is
Um,
the opposite of what most people do.
I didn't want to
You're
grow
the first person that said that.
I did not want to grow my practice into something that was this insurance beast that I felt enslaved to, and I was too afraid to drop it. And so I ripped that Band-Aid off first.
How big a part was it? 50% of your practice? Was it close?
Yeah, it was 50%.
50% of your practice. You just had a startup. You're a year in.
Yep.
You got big cojones. I'm telling you, that's awesome. And talk about what it felt like to drop potentially 50% of your practice.
It's terrifying. But when you run the numbers and you realize that you can lose 50% of your practice and still make the same freaking amount of money, it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I running myself into the ground? Why am I adding employees and increasing my overhead? why am I doing all these things and literally getting paid like $100 for a filling? Like, what is this? Like, this is not what I went to school for. And as we touched on, I'm super involved in advanced continuing education. And so I'm doing high quality dentistry. I'm using high quality materials and high quality labs, and I'm getting paid nothing for it.
Mhm.
I'm losing money on a lot of these procedures, and I didn't have a ton of negotiating power when I set these contracts up because I was a scratch start. And so I didn't, I already wasn't getting paid on a super competitive pay scale anyway, even by insurance standards. And it really negatively impacted my mental health because the more that I practiced and the longer I practiced with all of these insurances, it made me feel like that's what I was worth. I was putting in all of this detail and all of this time and effort and energy. And then I was getting checks back for like $54. I was like, why am I doing this? This sucks. I'm not doing this. Um, and it's frustrating for me to see so many so many of our colleagues that have all of these limiting beliefs that are like, oh, I can't drop that. It's so much of my practice. Like, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You so can. And that's what's frustrating to me.
Thanks for listening to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee for service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee for Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.